Good morning. Number of guests, and we appreciate your presence very much so. I know that we still have some at Lads to Leaders. Lynn, how many did we have up there at Lads to Leaders? Well, it was a bunch. But anyway, we had, I think she said 80, didn't you say? 70 something. Okay, and some of them are still there. So, or they may be heading back. They have a worship service early in the morning up there in Louisville, and then I'm sure some are heading back, so pray for them as they make their way back this way. I remember Ivan Overton in your prayers this week. He has surgery Tuesday, and we want to be certainly in prayer on his behalf. There is such a thing as good death. And I hope you understand what I'm talking about, and I'll try to illustrate that. I never will forget a conversation that I kind of set in on. I took an elderly lady to visit another elderly lady years ago. And I don't know how they came up with the subject, but they started talking about death. And the lady we were visiting, she says, well, I know we all got to die. And she says, here's how I want to die. I want to be awake and alert and talking to my family right up to the last minute. And the other one, the one that I took with me to see her, she said, oh, no, I can't stand the thought of that. She said, I want to die in my sleep. Now, I lived long enough to see both of them pass away, and I'm happy to say that they both got their wishes. The lady that wanted to talk and be aware of everything, I was there at the hospital the day she died, and she was carrying on a pretty good conversation with her family. She knew that her time was short. And she expired pretty much in mid-sentence. But she was awake and alert and talking. The other lady, I'm glad to say, died peacefully in her sleep. They got what they wanted. Today, in our world, we are able to do better than generations past. Something that everybody in every generation has always tried to do for their loved ones, and that is to give comfort measures to those who are dying. Now, sometimes that creates all sorts of issues. My daughter struggles with sometimes families are reluctant to let their family members go, and so they urge the staff to do everything in their power to keep them alive, even though it's probably not in the best interest of the patient, and that's a struggle for her and other medical workers I know. But we're able to give comfort measures to those who are in pain so that we allow a person to die without being in extreme pain. And I'm glad that we live in an age in which we have that ability to be able to usher a person into eternity without the family having to see them fight and struggle and be in intense pain. I think one of the greatest services that exist is hospice. The idea, and by the way, that the church is the one that started the practice of hospice, of being with people when they passed away and helping them to depart this world in an honorable fashion. But I've been a part of people who have been served by hospice, and I just think it's such a wonderful service in which, in many cases, it allows the person to pass away at home and to be with their loved ones, and now they have facilities that are just wonderfully beautiful facilities that allow a person to be surrounded by their loved ones as they take that last step in this life. It's just such a profound service. Now, I realize that nobody wants to even talk about death, even though it is ever present. I'm shocked at the people who are not prepared to die. And by that, I'm not talking about just in the realm of salvation. I'm talking about just a family making arrangements, or a person making an arrangement to take that off the parents. That used to be a pretty common practice, especially among my grandparents' era. They knew that it was coming, and they wanted to go ahead and take care of all the financial part of it and not leave the family with the burden and the decision making and all of that. I like that, and I appreciate what people have done. But it just, we live in an age in which you read all sorts of analysis about why people die, and the heart attack and cancer and all of the things, and they'll say so many people die per year of this. The truth of the matter is, folks, whether we want to face it or not, we all die. I read the other day, I don't know whether it's true, it was on Facebook, surely it must be true. I told Lynn this, that there was a fellow that shot at a policeman. I think he may have killed the policeman, and supposedly the police people went after him and they shot him like 80 times. And the reporter says, "Isn't that a bit too much? Why did you shoot him that many times?" And the sheriff said, "Well, that's all the ammunition we had." But the thing is that the coroner filled out that he died a natural death. And they asked the coroner about that. "Why did you put down that he died a natural death?" And he says, "Well, usually when you have 80 bullet holes in you, you die naturally anyway." Not all of us go in that manner. I certainly hope not. I remember Carter catching this concept of a good death when he wasn't too awful old. I don't remember exactly how old, but we went to see one of the Lord of the Rings movie, and most of you've seen it. In Lord of the Rings, there's this ring that gains control over people, and it has all sorts of magical powers, but it's really a thing of evil. And this one character was drawn by this ring and being pulled towards it and trying to steal it and to obtain it in any way that he could. And this guy was being changed from a good guy to a bad guy. But in this one scene, that this king that had really turned evil in his desire to get this ring, it's a battle scene, and all of a sudden in the heat of battle, he loses his desire for the ring, and he regains his desire to do the right thing. And he ends up dying in battle. But he dies doing the right thing. And Carter looked at me and he said, "That's what you mean when you talk about a good death, isn't it?" I said, "That's it." We admire people that die as heroes. I heard somebody say, and you've heard it too, that I'd rather be a live chicken than a dead hero. One of my favorite corny jokes is three men were discussing what they wanted people to say when they looked at them in the casket. And one guy said, "Well, I want them to look at me and say that he was a good husband and a good father and a good Christian man." And the second man says, "Well, I want them to say those things, but I want them to say that everybody remembers me for kindness, and everybody loved him. And he made the world a better place because he was here." And the third guy said, "I want him to look at me in my casket and say, 'Look, he's moving.'" The thought of death isn't very pleasant, is it? We'd rather be a live chicken than a dead hero. But you understand what I'm saying. You understand that if you're going to die and you're faced with doing the right thing or the cowardly thing, we all prefer to go out as a hero and to be remembered in that way. But not everybody dies as a hero or dies surrounded by loved ones. There are people that die in a dishonorable way. I love the story of the prodigal son as you do, but the truth of the matter is Jesus could have told the story 2 or 3 different ways, couldn't he? and they all been true. He could have told the story about the prodigal son saying to his father, give me my money, and he goes out and he wastes his money and he dies before he gets to come back home, because that's the truth of the matter for a lot of people, isn't it? There are a lot of people that choose to walk away from God and go out and live in the far country, and they die. They never get to come back. There are people that leave the Father and go out and die in circumstances that's beneath pigs. Some of them live in fancy mansions and wear fine clothes and drive fine cars, but it's still a pig pen and they're still away from the Father. There are people that make poor choices and die rather embarrassing deaths. You know, the redneck's last words is, hey y'all, watch this. And it just leaves the people behind with this terrible feeling that their loved one died in a foolish manner, and it can happen to all of us. It's just you look, you read the obituaries, you read the news, and you think, what were people thinking? There are people that leave this world in a way that just doesn't leave their family with much to reflect on. I did a funeral one time, and it was one of those deals. It was when I was in a small community, and I do miss that. I miss the small community. Appleton is this bedroom community where people move out here and stay a couple of years and move back, and it doesn't have, the community feel like Danny Oliver would remember when you knew everybody around here. Things have exploded, and there's just not a sense of community. But I was living in this community, and I heard that this man had cancer, and I started visiting him, and I didn't visit him 2 or 3 times before he passed away, but turns out I was the only preacher that visited him, and they didn't know me really, and I didn't really know them, and so they asked me to preach the funeral. And what I like to do, and especially in cases, I like to have a celebration of life service. I do. And what I try to do is I try to talk to the family members, and I do this with everybody, but especially if I don't know the person, and I want to honor their memory as much as I can. So I started talking to people about this man, trying to get some information to relate to the funeral audience, and this was disturbing, folks. I couldn't find anybody that liked the man except for his wife. I'm not making that up. He couldn't get along with anybody. Not even his kids. I hope you're living a life better than that. Because we're all going to pass away, and we ought to leave our family something to make us smile. I think of Leanne's grandmother, Mimi. She was just a sweet, sweet lady. I think Leanne is going to be like Mimi. Already is in many ways. But Mimi, she had lost her husband, and she didn't tell me, I got this secondhand, but she told someone that she still dreamed about her husband. And the dream, that it was a reoccurring dream, and they were in a crowd, and no doubt it had something to do with church, because Leanne has such a wonderful spiritual heritage. Her family, she has one ancestor, I think it was her great-grandfather, that never missed church. The one time that he came close to it, was that your grandfather or great-grandfather? Great-grandfather never missed church. He came close one time. He had mumps, and he got a chair, and he set it outside the window of the church. Ain't that a great spiritual heritage? You ought to leave your family with something to rejoice over. But anyway, Mimi would dream about being in a room filled with people, probably some kind of church gathering because that was their life. And across the room, she would see her husband and he would wink at her. And that was her reoccurring dream. After years and years of marriage, there was still that flirting going on between Mimi and her husband. I love that. You ought to live in such a way that you leave your family something to smile about and rejoice about. Because you are going to die. There are deaths that come about that there's just no good way to deal with them. I mean, I could use 2 or 3 things here, but I think about one instance that this young lady that I just barely knew. I knew her family well. Apparently had decided to have a one-night stand with a man. And during the night that she spent with him, some people came in and brutally murdered her. Apparently it was a drug deal, and she just happened to be there. And that's been 28 years ago, and they still don't know who did it. And I think about the mother of that young lady and the devastation she put. Don't put yourself in bad situations. But the violence, the evil there is just, it just makes no sense. And that exists in our world, doesn't it? That's the kind of death Jesus died in, a violent death. You know, it infuriates me that we could read the story of Jesus and not be moved. That may say something very negative about your heart. And mine too, because at times I become complacent. You see, Jesus was put to death at the instigation of religious people. That's so wrong. But it wasn't just that he died. It's that they wanted to break him as a man before he died. They wanted to humiliate him. I've told you this enough that certainly you know this for now. Preachers oftentimes talk about the death by crucifixion as the most painful death a human can die. I don't know about that. I don't know that there's a scale to measure the pain of death. There's some horrible ways of dying. The Romans certainly had their share of them. But the Bible never does mention, really, the level of pain that Jesus experienced. It focuses on the humiliation. In other words, the Bible wants you to know that Jesus went through the most humiliating experience that they could put him through. Because it wasn't just about him dying, it was about them torturing him. It was about them trying to break him. Don't you love him? Because even when they shoved the crown of thorns on his head and blood trickling down his face, he's still regal, he's still noble. They're smacking him around. He never once curses them. He never once threatens them. He's hanging on the cross and they're mocking him and he prays for them. I don't care how beaten and bloody he was the king. I think about the disciples. You know, the feeling of failure. I hate failing. Listen, I hate failing. I've quit sports, basically. I mean, you can tell, but I quit sports, and it's not because I've got older and wiser. It's because I hate losing. I hate feeling like a failure. I tried golf, dumb sport. I tried it. The reason I tried it was to start studying the Bible with a guy, and I ended up baptizing him. So I accomplished something with my golf. That's just torturous. Torturous. Man, the second, third, and fourth time I played, I'd lay in bed at night and think, this is easy. Why am I making... I couldn't even hit the ball off the tee. I don't know what the deal was. I mean, I would swing, and then I finally figured out, I'm not paying money to be mad. I'm not doing it anymore. But part of the problem is, folks, I do own a course record. I knocked out the biggest limb of on the course at Fall Creek Falls one time. I hit a tree in perfect time, and there was a limb that was probably that big around and fell out of the tree just as I hit it. I don't think that I did that. But a guy told me, you now have the record here. Biggest limb ever knocked out of a tree. Part of the reason I hate it is I can't stand for people to see me fail, and the disciples failed Jesus, didn't they? And they're dealing with that when he's dead. Peter's having to deal with the fact that he denied him and that he swore that he didn't know him. The disciples are having to deal with the fact that they ran off and left him. And there's shame of that and the grief of that. Good grief, they had invested 3.5 years of their life. And for what? Later on, they're going to have good memories. I mean, if nothing else, if there wasn't a resurrection, they're going to have good memories of being with Jesus. But in that moment of grief, those memories don't really come, do they? That's a little later on. And I think about the fear that they must have had. That's something, boy, I don't know if people here can understand this. I don't know if you deal with the same fears that I do or the same level that I've been afraid a lot in my life. And fear strong enough produces this metallic-like taste in your throat. I don't know if you've experienced that. I've known others, I've heard others say that. It's just this horrendous fear. This terrible, overpowering thing. You know, the Bible, they say, says, fear not 365 times. In other words, once for every day of the year. And even though it says it so much, I still wrestle with fear. The disciples, no doubt, are grieving that Jesus is dead, but they're filled with the fear that that same group is going to come and get them and do the same thing to them that they did to Jesus. I can't help but get aggravated. That's not the right word. I hate the thought of the Sanhedrin Council, the people that were supposed to be the religious leaders, getting ready after they have railroaded Jesus and pushed and urged the political system to crucify him, and then to incite the people to yell out, crucify him, and then to stand around the cross and mock him. And their motivation was jealousy, their motivation was hatred, and then as soon as that's done, they run home and get ready to observe the Passover. That just makes me sick. Good grief, what people are capable of doing, the hypocrisy. We expect corruption in many areas. But boy, it's so bad when it's in religion, isn't it? How in the world do they go and observe the Passover and to try to be pure and holy and thinking of God when he just killed a man they know didn't do anything wrong? I talked to a sniper this past Monday, a guy that's been out of the military for just a little while. His job was a sniper. And he said that he'd really had a rough time with it, of course. And he gave me the distance of some of his shots that he made. He used it in meters, so I don't have a clue how long it was. But he said, he can still at night lay down and try to sleep, and he can visualize through his scope his targets, and he could see their face. Focused, and he got the wind and all of that, and his spotter would line him up and everything, and he would take the shot, and then he would drop. He wouldn't look anymore other than to know that he got him. And here's a man that is killing killers. Here is a man that is saving lives by his action. Here is a man that we would say is doing the world a favor. And even though he was doing what we would consider good, he wrestles daily with the taking of a life of an evil person. How in the world did the Sanhedrin councils live with themselves, killing an innocent man? What in the world was Satan thinking? I've often thought about that. What is Satan thinking? I mean, I can't. Is Satan even capable of rejoicing? I'd love to wax poetically. It's just not in me. I have this visual, but I can't describe it. But Satan has a throne, but what is that throne sitting on? I know where it's sitting. It's in hell. And I know that his companions who work for him don't even want to be there with him. You remember that instance where there's a number of demons and they didn't want to go back to the pit. They chose to be in a pig rather than in the pit. They didn't want to go back to their boss. He has a throne, but it's sitting on a cesspool. It's sitting on a garbage pile. And the garbage pile is wrecked lives. Jesus is dead. Does Satan think that he won a victory? I don't know. He was dead. Sunday morning, sun just coming up. All was quiet in Jerusalem. Maybe the roosters had started crowing. And the power of God entered into the body of Jesus. And his eyes opened, and he sat up. The angels rolled away the stone, not to let Jesus out, but to let people in. Some people go to the tomb and he's not there, and the angel has this. Angels probably don't argue. They're not as foolish as us in some respects, but I would have wanted the line that angel gave, right? I mean, I don't know whether they drew straws. I don't know how it works. But I'd want to be the angel that stood there at the tomb, or the two of them, and when the disciples show up, to get to say, why do you seek the living among the dead? He's not here. He's risen. Woo-hoo. You had to be a good angel to get that. But that's what the angel said. Now listen, I don't know if this is making too much out of it. But do you know what the first thing Jesus says that we know of after he was raised from the dead? It's in Matthew 28, verse 9. He encounters some of the women. And I get tickled at this, okay? I get tickled at this. The English Standard Version and most modern translations have him saying greetings. I have never in my life walked up to somebody and said greetings. That's one of those things you know to take me off the street. I'm no longer safe if you hear me say it. The King James really makes it august in that it says all hail. That ain't what he said. I know he used the word ain't. It's for emphasis. It ain't what he said. The first word that Jesus said to announce to the world that he was alive was hello. I love that. How powerful. Now, if you want to get technical about it, go to Greece, and when you're walking around the streets of modern-day Greece, they use the same word today that they used back then, and it's not greetings, and it's not all hail. It's karate. Sound like karate, didn't it? It's basically hello. It's not a formal hello, it's hello. Now, the word actually appears in another place that just about everybody in here can quote. You remember when Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice, the word rejoice is the exact same word. So Jesus walks up to these women and says, hello, or it could be translated, rejoice. In that one word, by the way, you know what he says next? Do not be afraid. In that one word, hello, is confirmed that Jesus is who he said he is. It confirms that he is the Son of God, that he is the Lamb of God which takes away the sins of the world, that he is the one that was and is to come, that he is the Savior of the world, and in that one word, we have the assurance that death has been defeated, and in Jesus Christ we can have eternal life. In that one word. And in that one word, folks, in that one word spoken by the man that was dead and is now alive, in that one word, it says to every person living on this planet Earth that you had better listen to him because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and he says what he means and he means what he says, and blessed are those who do his will. In that one word. I heard this story this week that a teacher assigned her class to write a paper about the greatest living person. And one student wrote about Jesus. And the teacher met with the student and says, now honey, this is a great essay, but I wanted you to write about someone living today. And the student said, I did. He is alive. We serve a risen Savior who says to you, hello, and I'm coming back to get mine one day. You ought to be ready for that, just as you ought to be ready for death. And you can be ready for death if you're in Jesus Christ. If you need to respond, please do so as we stand and sing together.
Jesus is Lord, my